Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today. And we're not quite up on the screen yet. There we go. My name is Bryan Runck, and I'm from the University of Minnesota. I'm in the Department of Geography and Environment Society. I'm working on a PhD there. I want to preface all this with I'm one small member of a very large transdisciplinary team. And these are the preliminary results from a culmination of about 7 years of work. And so I came in about a year ago. But you can see these are some of our core members. And as we've sought more funding, this group now is beginning to fill out more and is beginning to get more momentum. And so we're very excited going forward in terms of how we're going to be using geodesign embedded within collaborative processes to move the needle on some of these issues of agricultural sustainability. So let me frame our project a little bit. We're talking about the 7 Mile Creek watershed, which is in Nicollet County, Minnesota, south central Minnesota. And this is a watershed. It's roughly 9,500 hectares, and the current land use of this watershed is 80% corn and soybeans. Now, I come from a corn and soybean farm. I love corn and soybeans, but those of you who understand land use know that land cover that's predominantly agriculture can often have negative impacts on water quality. And so it's this tension that we're putting ourselves within, the tension between highly productive, highly profitable agricultural land and then environmental resources on the other end. And so one solution to trying to find win-win scenarios is strategic biomass production to create what we call multifunctional landscapes. So when we say a multifunctional landscape, we mean a landscape that provides water quality, biodiversity, as well as food, fiber, and fuel, along with all sorts of other ecosystem services, aesthetics, et cetera, et cetera. And when we say strategic biomass production, we're talking about planting these native mixtures, switchgrass, and even using corn stover in a sustainable way. And so we're trying to find multiple ways to get at this idea of multifunctionality. The big question, though, is how. We have private ownership of land. We have many constituents that are fighting over how this watershed should look. And that's where we came and kind of backed into this mixture of collaboration plus geodesign. And so what has been done so far is that there's been a series of workshops that were organized in 2013, and there are 8 meetings. 4 of those meetings were more emphasized social learning, kind of background. Co-teaching, we had a room full of experts, whether that be lay knowledge or academic knowledge. And then the last 4 meetings were with our specific iteration of the tool. And you can see kind of the general look of what it was like when we'd break people into small groups to actually begin designing the landscape. So you see them in this big room here, broken up, discussing, engaging, pushing and pulling on ideas. And as we went through this, we did a series of 8 surveys after the end of each workshop. And we did 2 sets of interviews individually, before and after, and then 1 focus group at the end for data collection. So, and the general gist of what the stakeholders were trying to accomplish when they were designing was to find win-win-win-wins. So we wanted to see an increase in water quality, which meant decreasing total suspended solids, decreasing total phosphorus loss, and decreasing runoff. And then an increase in the value of habitat, market return, landscape appearance, and carbon sequestration. Now, I could go into all the details of the models. I won't. It sounds like a good conversation over beer. But I want you to know that this is a heavily researched watershed and that these were robust models that were generally very reliable. So stakeholders would go through a process of first redesigning the landscape, and then they would be able to get quantitative feedback from their new imagined futures. They do this multiple times, and then they could compare their designs to see which ones were meeting their objectives better, or meeting certain people's objectives better and other people's objectives better, and then discuss that. So In terms of results, one question that we are beginning to explore is how did participants respond to the quantitative feedback and then alter their subsequent design? And so what I'm going to show you is a time series of designs. And we're going to just focus on one group, and that's from the northern sub-watershed. And we've got these things, I have an agroecology background, and so this is a Spiderweb diagram. Not to go into all the details of it, kind of two things to really pay attention to in order for us to understand this design and then iteration response. One, this circle around here, the dark one, that's the existing condition. That's the 80% corn soybean land. So that's where it would fall. So if you take one of the spokes of the wheel out, that's where sediment falls on this relative scale in corn and soybean production. And you can do that for water yield, carbon sequestration, etc. What you see here is we want to decrease water yield, sediment, and phosphorus. And so this red line would actually be, hey, we've made some improvements. Likewise, we see this increase in market return compared to the existing condition. Same with habitat and carbon sequestration. So again, we're going to focus on the shape that this diagram is making as kind of a way to get a feel for what was going on. And so here we've got a map of the first design that this group did, and you can see what the result is. So conservation tillage is what they put across all this. Good, robust, NRCS, endorsed practice, and we see the results. Next design. Okay, a little bit different approach. It looks like they're maybe using one of the background data layers here. Next one. Oh man, this is starting to look something like what my imaginary win-win-win-win was looking like. But then we see this interesting shift. We don't know exactly what it's from, but all of a sudden we see buffers drawn. So maybe someone else took over group leadership. And we see then performance, what's happening. And then again, so we see piecemeal beginning to add in. And then finally, this is the last design that the group did that day. Gosh, that looks a lot like what my ideal situation would be if I was trying to get a win-win-win-win. This is very encouraging for geodesign in a collaborative process. So the second question that we'll explore today is what were the impacts of the geodesign technology on the overall process? And so I have a few kind of broad themes that were derived from doing a rigorous quantitative analysis. I'll give you the specific details later if you'd like. The first two of the four that I'll talk about is one, they talked about this iterative exploring design process as this, and we've heard this today actually, which I think is really interesting. They said specifically, transcribed, it's a rapid what-ifing. These are members of the design groups. And then two, they also found that it added a potentially adds complexity to the design, or to the participatory process. You see that in this brief but very telling quote. The geodesign technology is wonderful, but has its technical problems. And we did have our technical problems. We had two meetings that the design actually maybe held back the thinking a little bit. And so that's something that we really need to work on addressing as we think about really making these socio-technical systems even better. So 3 and 4, this is interesting because we talked about this earlier. They said that it bounds group expectations, and then 4 decreases barriers between people. So this quote, there's a real key benefit of this process. Getting different kinds of people together, having them discuss a problem, communicate, and working out some things, and they may not all agree from the get-go, of course, but if they have at it with the decision-making software, and you can kind of look at your landscape model and the benefits, not only the cost benefits, but environmental as well, and that's kind of that's the objective decider for the group. And then the second one, what was unique was the use of geodesign in the context of the conversation we were having about the landscape. It allowed people to perhaps unintentionally lower those proposed barriers that they might normally have. So next steps, we're going to be expanding our workshops to have an official steering committee and sustainability standards group and supply chain design, and actually be coming up with policy recommendations. and further developing our design tool. I want to thank our funding, acknowledging time, and thank you all for letting me present here today. You can find me on Twitter or email me with any questions.
Great. Thank you, Bryan. Thank you. Good job.